Hello, my name's Martin Hinchelwood. I'm a professional Scrum Trainer with Scrum.org, as well as a Microsoft MVP. I'm here in Scotland, and my good friend Jim is over in... Where are you, Jim?
I'm in the United States, in the
In the
Midwest.
Midwest.
Ohio.
Ohio, okay. So that's... if there's a delay or there's a problem, it might be because of the internet. Isn't this about the... Well, this is kind of just after lunch in the US?
Yeah, it's 3 o'clock my time
So
here,
everybody's not
Eastern
playing on
time.
Netflix yet.
Probably within the hour or so.
Cool. So I am interested in the question that you had for me um, the other day. Could you uh, give me that? Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, so I got a call from a colleague of mine who is on the Agile journey, let's say, and his current struggle is from a technical perspective. So he has a number of development teams, and his developers just don't they're not thinking in an agile manner. They are not validating and getting good feedback from customers. And frankly, to be honest, the biggest thing is they just don't seem to really care about um, bad quality going out the door, or not meeting the customer's needs. And these are internal customers at a corporation. Um, but he was asking me, how would you train development team members on Agile and Scrum? And that was really why I reached out to you, because my expertise is more around product ownership and Scrum mastery than it is working, and teaching development skills.
Yeah.
But I don't think this is a development skill problem, but I'm curious to hear what you think.
Yeah, I was literally just thinking that. I was thinking that it doesn't sound like a development skill problem. Um, I find that engineers tend to be reasonably smart people. Um, and the reason you might have a problem is because they're disengaged from the work. So just like you would expect a product owner or a scrum master to step up um, and maybe being a little bit, I don't know what the word is, blunt, maybe, step up and do their job. I also expect an engineering team to step up and do theirs. But if they're disengaged with their work, that tends to be a cultural problem.
Yeah. And that's really where my comments to him went is, we can do technical practices. We can teach TDD. We can do pair programming and mob programming sessions, and we can talk about iterative design and emergent design and all that. But really, it seems like, how do you get people to care, and how do you get them to care about quality and have some pride in workmanship, pride in craftsmanship? And the interesting thing about that is their business is very manufacturing focused. So they are used to delivering end products like tangible goods to customers. So I think there's some interesting analogies there around caring about quality and customer feedback, and kind of that aspect of software craftsmanship.
Yep. And I it's definitely a difficult one because if you do have people that are technically competent, it's always possible that you don't. But if you do have people that are technically competent, then it comes down to the ex the intrinsic motivations rather than extrinsic motivations. You'll be familiar with Dan Pink's book, Drive, and talking about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And that's usually where I would start for an engineering team is look at what are they lacking in those three things.
Right. Yeah, that's good. I've spent quite a bit of time with some of these teams, so I think I could take a few guesses, but I mean, it would be presumptuous of me to know at the individual level, but I think at the high level, um, their autonomy is probably not great. Um, and their sense of purpose is probably pretty
Yeah.
low. The thing I don't know, the dimension I don't know is their mastery, because I know that, he had the feeling of I need to pair program with experienced agile developers to teach them skills. So I think there's two aspects to it. I think there's a technical concern that they're not great developers, and then I think the mindset concern of people to care. How do you teach people to think of principles and keep those in mind when they're doing their work?
Yeah, exactly. You were breaking up a little bit there. It wasn't too bad. I think it was an internet issue. That's just the world we live in.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it'll be fine as we go. Yeah, I've noticed a few
Okay.
weird things have happened recently, and that's that I decided I wanted another webcam because I have another monitor over here, and when I'm looking at this monitor, it looks like I'm not looking at you. Yeah. And I went to buy a webcam,
Same thing. Yeah.
and there aren't any left.
I've heard that.
No hair clippers either.
Oh yeah, this is terrible. This is the worst mine has been in years.
Yeah, my wife's been complaining quite a lot, but we just don't have clippers. She's got a pair of scissors, but I don't know if I want to let her have a go with a pair of scissors. Yeah, interesting stuff.
You know who still got clippers in stock, I bet?
Who?
Pet stores.
Pet stores? Pet stores. Yeah,
Yep.
that's a good point.
I was at a pet store over the weekend and they had a whole shelf load of clippers.
So, yeah, it's interesting. I read an interesting article, which I guess is pertinent for the type of work that we do in Flow, as to why there's so many shortages. And the article was talking about the flow of goods has more than one channel. So, for example, for toilet paper, which is currently substantially missing from shelves, there are companies that make commercial grade toilet paper, and those don't make it onto the supermarket shelves, and we're no longer using commercial grade toilet paper. So those distribution channels are empty. They've got all the toilet paper but nobody to use them, and the what's it, the opposite of commercial? The public, consumer. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah.
The consumer chains are getting overloaded because of just that switch. So everybody's making the same amount of toilet paper. We're just using it differently.
Yeah, I think this is akin to like the 1940s where new markets are going to pop up. So things that we're used to dispose of, we're now going to be like, what can we use this for? And then so there's going to be this use of byproducts, and it'll be really interesting to see if we kind of kick off this second self-sustaining generation, this of being self-sufficient and eating what you grow and using the most of everything. And this could be an amazing shift away from rampant consumerism. But it's funny, I did a consumer products company last year, and I feel that right now there is a data science experiment going on in every retail store in the world, which is two things. It's buying patterns. So what are people buying first in times of hysteria? I am more intrigued by the products that are left on the shelves. So what is the last bag of pretzels bought? What is the last jar of peanut butter bought? What is the last type of toilet paper to be grabbed? And what would influence those decisions? And do companies and retailers care Or would a data scientist, and I'm not a data scientist, say, you know, you can't make any decisions during a time like this because it's unprecedented and it's not significant from a data perspective because of the
Yep.
hysteria and impulse nature of things. I don't know, but to me, it's always shocking to be like, look at all the ketchups. Why is that one ketchup left and all the other ones
Yep.
are gone? Like, what does that tell that
I've seen
producer?
a few images from people taking pictures in supermarkets of the vegan aisle in the supermarket, and everything's still there. I did think that was interesting, and I
Mm-hmm.
noticed it in my local supermarket as well. That all of the meat replacement goods where all the shelves were fully stocked. But it's funny, I did have some recently, and it's pretty tasty. It's just not the go-to that people think of when they go shopping. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think again, and I don't want to get too like philosophical. If you think about which of your principles will be the last to go, and which ones are the
Yep.
first to go. So I have a friend who's a vegan or was a vegan, and is like, I don't care. I'm eating meat right now because I need protein, and they're amassing meat. So they quickly let that principle go out of for many reasons: fear, hysteria, impulse, etc. But it just is, it's very telling in my
I
opinion.
I agree, and it depends how long this goes on for both of those things. You know, what's your last principle to go, as well as whether the data science is going to have an impact, whether changes significant changes need to be made to the distribution pipeline. And I think there are some people. I've been reading some articles, people talking about everything changing, that it will just be different from now on. But then it hasn't been that different in Asia, where they've been through something like this before. They still have rampant
Yeah.
consumerism. They still have everybody just wears masks. You see that a lot. Even just
Hmm.
people wear them anyway when they're out. And I think it's going to be interesting how long this goes on for. What's going to change, because we've got an expectation in the UK from our what's he called, the health person in chief, the chief scientist behind some of the decisions they're making, and he
Hmm.
says it's 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
We're going to be in some kind of restricted setup. They've already said that the schools here, I don't know what it's been like for you guys, but the schools here aren't going back till after the summer holidays. So that's August before the schools go back at the earliest. And I guess they'll reassess then and see what's going on. But homeschooling is something that seems to be happening a lot, and some places have their act together for schools doing some kind of distance learning, and other places they're just emailing some homework and hoping people do it.
Yeah. You know, I had a conversation the other day with a family member, and she was like, you know, man, wouldn't this be have been great when we were kids? And I said, no, because um, we'd be bored. Like when I hear kids today talk, I just want to smack them upside. There, you have no board in 2020. Um, but it would be different back then. Like, how would they, even in the
Yep.
1990s, I was in, um, they would be like homework and you go through the drive through homework assignments and bring them home, redeliver them. But technology available now that can exist 5 years, 20 years. Um, so yeah, it's unprecedented. So to bring it back to what you and I do for a living,
Yeah.
so we talk about principles. What principles do you think are even more important now, and that teams should focus on and really um, spend a lot of time? working to strengthen given this new, I'm calling it our new wow, our way of working.
Yep.
So given our new wow, what's more important than ever before?
I would think coming back to some of the Scrum values probably makes sense for me. I think it's going to be really hard to get teams to have the same level of commitment to each other that they can have in person when you can poke the other person. You know that other person is there. When you can't see somebody you've said you'll do something for, is the same level of commitment going to be apparent? And how do we create that same level of commitment? I'm just hoping teams are not thinking that they only need to talk during the daily scrum.
Yeah, somebody, a Scrum Master, asked me the other day, hey, does it feel to you like we have more meetings now? And I got thinking, it does. And the reason is I look at my calendar and I have a number of quick 15, 20 invites that say, discuss this technical problem or discuss this plan or do this, where those conversations would have happened organically in the off in a drive-by, like walking up to the vehicle, having a conversation would have been done. If we had to go third person, we just, now you see, I'm going to schedule time with you to make sure you're in the WebEx camera and able to, focus on this. So it does feel like there's more of a scheduled nature to work. It's interesting though, you talk about like, I think what I heard you talking about was follow-up, like committing, like delivering commitments to each other. A lot of times lately where I have forgotten I owed somebody something pretty small because I just get distracted. I'm not as focused as I was before in the office, and I didn't have all my tools and trappings available to keep me focused on the work at hand. So I find it easier for little things to slip through. But then the flip side of that is I have much more attitude now, and I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I can, give me 2 minutes. I'm going to run to the kitchen, bite, and I'll be right back, and I can do that. At work, maybe being distracted by not value-added things.
Yeah, I agree, and I think especially with everybody off, the schools being off and people's kids being at home, there can't be the same expectation of commitment from folks anyway. I think it's going to be very difficult to find that level of commitment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do the metrics change at all, or do you think that the metrics that leadership in the organization cares about is going to change if this persists for months and months?
It depends if leadership are focused on. Yeah, I'm going to use a bad phrase. I don't like using it. The metrics they should be rather than metrics they shouldn't. Then I don't think they should change. We should be looking at for engineering teams or any teams building some kind of product or some kind of output. We should be looking at value delivery. Are we getting the most valuable thing? It doesn't really matter whether people spend 12 hours a day or 2 hours a day. If we're getting enough value that we as an organization and our customers are happy with the output that we're getting, the output, I used the wrong word again, the outcomes that we're getting, then it's irrelevant how much people actually work.
Right. But I think, and again, I'm making some leaps here, is an organization that has a really good track record of measuring outcomes and value could easily say, hey, we're getting the same or greater value delivered than we used to. But think about a company or organization who had what their value was, and they were only measuring output and activities like hours billed or lines of code written. my fear is they are going to over-index even more so and over-focus on getting every drop of orange juice out of that fruit, and say I have to squeeze harder, and say, well, hey, you're getting what you've always gotten, so you should be happy with, we have lower costs probably, and we're getting the same. But to say that, we have to know what the same was.
Yep.
So a company that didn't do the hard work early to figure out how to measure and track value delivery doesn't have a baseline.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I think that it's going to be very difficult for those companies to figure out what they're going to do. And I have a slight inkling that those companies will just die. I've got a feeling that as they realize that from their perspective they're not getting their return on investment, because their investment is based on quantity of work, not quality of work. So they feel that they're not getting their return on investment. They divest themselves of employees in order to. I mean, how many employees in the last? How many people signed on in the? Oh, that's a British expression. What's it called when you register as unemployed in the US? There's a name for it. I can't remember what the US is. We call it signing on here.
File.
File for over 10 million people have filed in the last 2 weeks in the US, and it's not been as high a percentage of that as that here in the UK, mainly because the government is paying 80% of people's salaries. Mm-hmm. In order for companies to stay in business and not go out of business. But I think companies that are focused solely on the bottom line, solely on profit, solely on that squeezing more juice out, I think they're going to go bust. They're going to break.
Yeah.
And I think there are exceptions, but I think that's what will happen.
There's two really interesting things that I see. One is people are being extra sensitive to expecting less. Like, I see people expecting less. So it'll be interesting to see how far this goes, if that correlates to people's take on the workplace and measuring and caring about the right things. But the other thing, completely different, is if I think about some of the really good people that I've worked with over the years, and I'm like, why are you still here? You seem to hate your job. You don't seem to like this company. And they're like, yeah, but I'm comfortable. I've been coming to this building every day for 12 years and I've been working with the same people. But imagine if you take all of that comfort away and everybody starts working remotely, even most of the time. Yep. Well, then changing your employer is just as simple as changing which VPN you log into. Yep. And what your email address is, and your workplace, the people you interact with, the building, your commute, none of that matters. So what you might see is a higher propensity for people to switch employers to ones that value the right things or seem to value them more, because it's the barrier to switch is greatly diminished.
Isn't that time limited as people either switch to employers who actually care rather than pretend to care, or start their own businesses to fill a gap in the market and care and hire people who care. Maybe this could be a big push for the purely capitalistic focused organizations who are going to struggle. Mm-hmm. If there was a big push towards lean, but in the wrong way. I have a horrible story about how lean was implemented. Lean Six Sigma, if you're familiar with the term. Lean Six Sigma was implemented in an organization that I worked with, where the IT support department did Six Sigma training. They got a Six Sigma consultant in. They spent 3 months doing this, figuring out what they were going to do, and then they implemented it. And what they implemented was shadow masks on their workstations, where their coffee cup goes at the end of the day, where their keyboard goes at the end of the day, where their mouse goes at the end of the day. And my question was, see that face you've got? That's the exact face I had when they were presenting their awesomeness that they'd managed to do in this Six Sigma world. And for me, they just completely missed the point. They missed the point.
So
they were focusing on, that part of lean where you would maybe optimize your workspace. And because maybe the consultant came out of a manufacturing world and they're talking around it in a manufacturing world, it was in fact a manufacturing company, so it there's a little bit of synergy there. There would be that level of expertise, but somebody in IT, the physical world is not their world. And my first question was, can I find files on the file server quicker now that... Can I create a support ticket quicker? Can I find out what's going on quicker? And I think that missing the point is happening quite a lot in our industry. It's why people talk about, Agile is dead or Scrum is dead. It's not that it's dead. People have just used the terms and features incorrectly. I'm trying not to be religious about it. It might work just fine, but they've messed with the name or implemented it in a way that doesn't necessarily provide them with the value that they were looking for, and then they complain that the thing doesn't work when in fact it's the implementation that doesn't work, and then backing off and not inspecting and adapting is the complete antagonistic opposite of agility.
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack, but something tells me that company read or attended some work by Paul Akers with 2 Second Lean, which is a great group of books. He's a great YouTube channel and a great company. And a lot of those little kind of workspace hacks come from his world. And 2 Second Lean is, what can you do in your day to save 2 seconds? Like, how can you optimize your thing? So if you create 2 little marks in your lunchroom, and this is where the salt shaker goes and this is where the pepper shaker goes, that might save 2 seconds. But then when we encourage people to say, how can you save 2 seconds? They end up saying, well, I found this thing that can save 30 minutes. Or I found this thing that can save 5 hours a week. So it's really about getting people thinking about waste and seeing the value in the 5 S's, one of which is, sorting and standardize this work. So there's value in that as far as building habits. I think some of the philosophy is, if we help people get good at organizing and see organizing as a way to reduce waste, they will figure out how to store files on a file server more efficiently. But I think so many times people stop at the easy stuff and they don't do the hard work to say, okay, great, you figured out where my keyboard should set on my desk, but what are we doing about that big giant problem in the IT world, or that big database problem that we have over there? And it's making that leap from the mindset of agility to the hard work and practice of agility.
I agree, and that's the thing that I see time and again in organizations. And it doesn't matter whether you call it lean, whether you call it Agile or Scrum or Kanban or DevOps. It doesn't matter what you call it. The same fundamental goal is there and is often missed. Because I know you don't come from a DevOps background. that correct?
Yeah, well, yes and no. My background before I got into the world of Agile was all infrastructure. So
Okay.
client server, cloud, network, all that. So I touched with DevOps a little bit. So I have a systems background, not a development background, but I'd say more kind of my background was always in building high performing teams. And knowing that my special power, my skill wasn't in always doing the work, but it was motivating, inspiring, and helping others do their best work. And that's kind of the world I live in the most.
Cool. So what is it that you're working on just now?
So right now I'm an agile coach and scrum master and trainer for Insight. So I do a lot of different things, but I am primarily a working scrum master and agile coach on a product line at a large company here in the United States. So I'm working with development teams and other scrum masters to get really, really important work done, very technical work. And it's really stretched my skills. It's taught me a lot. This engagement has taught me a lot about myself, about what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, and how it's really helped me figure out how to help build high performing
Yep.
teams.
Have you run any of the Scrum.org classes remotely yet?
So I am leading our very first one in the company in April.
Okay.
We're going to do a PSM live
It
virtual
is April.
of April later this month.
Yeah.
The tick tock. Trust me, I feel a little bit of stress and anxiety there, but I'm very excited too, though. And then I'm going to be co-pilot on the more than likely on the PSF live
Yep.
virtual and a PAL-E. I might be leading a PAL-E live virtual.
Okay. So I have a PALE in 2 weeks.
Okay.
So I'm doing a PALE in the Edinburgh time zone. This is a
Mm-hmm.
public PALE. I have two normal people and one PST coming. So I
Normal.
don't know how difficult that will be for my first live virtual classroom escapade. So that's going to be interesting. I attended a workshop last week. Was Todd's workshop,
Mm-hmm.
and he did it was me as a PST and a bunch of normal people who were from his some of his classes who were just exploring things, and they went through a workshop. So some good learnings there in figuring out not only how to run the workshop but how to maintain the engagement levels. That was really good. I really enjoyed that. But I've got
Yeah.
I'm jumping in. I've literally got I've got next week free, and then I jump into PALE Monday, Tuesday. Then the next Monday, Tuesday, PSF. Next Monday, Tuesday, PSF. Next Monday, Tuesday, PSM. So it's going to be a
Wow.
little bit full on. At least I don't have them all in the same week. Luckily, I've got two private PSFs that I'm doing, and luckily the customer said, we want to do it private, which is good, and we want to do it Monday Tuesdays because they have deployments on a Saturday. Their
Okay.
deployments go out every Saturday, so they wanted to front load the week rather than backload the week. So that helped me out a little bit as well. It meant that they didn't want two in the same week, which was a good idea.
Yeah.
Give me some time to prep in between and optimize things a little bit. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well.
You'll have to fill me in after the first one because we're experimenting with 4 half-day sessions
Okay.
because I just feel like it's going to be exhausting for both the instructors and the students to do days, and I have never been successful in keeping someone's attention electronically for more than 3 to 4 hours.
Yep.
Um, but I also know that there's pros and cons to that approach. The other thing I'm curious, are you going to have a facilitator or somebody who's supporting you from a logistics standpoint so you can focus on teaching?
So right now, no, I don't have
Mm,
anybody who's going to be helping me out. So I'm going to be doing it all, which is where I'm thinking about the tools that I'm going to use.
mm-hmm.
Obviously, obviously for us maybe, but that mural has been seems to be a useful tool.
Yeah.
I had it in the workshop last week. It worked really well. I've seen bits and pieces of it before, and I think all the other trainers have been using it to facilitate their workshops. So much so that I think Scrum.org are going to be bringing out some templates. I think there's already templates available for, is it the PSM?
PSM and PSM2, I believe, have
Have templates.
templates.
So I think that will help a lot, even if it's just giving everybody a jump start and then some stuff's pre-prepared and we can just implement those templates.
Mm-hmm.
But also the video conferencing tool that we're going to be using, I think, is important as well. I had planned to use Zoom, and the reason I plan to use Zoom is it's got breakout rooms, but
Mm-hmm.
Zoom has some significant issues right now. Not everybody's happy using Zoom based on the security concerns that have come out in the last little while. Well, it's always the case. Once when you're a little player, nobody cares. Then you become a big player, and everybody cares. And I think
Yeah.
the I'm not particularly bothered about leakage personally, if that makes sense. Like if some part of my video goes out and people get a hold of it, yeah, okay, whatever. That's okay. But I think it's more the concern of students in the class. So I'm
Yeah.
definitely running the PSFs in Microsoft Teams, which is secure, or at least doesn't have any known big ass holes in it. But it does then require everybody to authenticate. But also, that's the thing that makes it more difficult to set up and manage initially. But it is the thing that negates the problem that people have with the with Zoom. That you can just
Sure.
jump in.
Yeah. Yeah, we're doing a lot of tool reviews as well. And it's funny because right as this thing hit, I had done a presentation around the relationship of tools with agility. And it was very, there's a certain amount of premonition there because I said tools do not make you agile, but they can absolutely enhance your
Yes.
agility. And getting good at tools and the application of tools should be something you focus on and value. But then even more interesting, I think, and I'm curious if you agree with this, is as we develop more and more mature skills, our tooling has to
Yep.
change. So I thought back to there's two analogies I use. One is when I started to golf. When I was a kid, I just used a pair of hand-me-down golf clubs, and they were okay. But then when my skills got to a certain point, the tools became a limiting factor. So then I went and I bought a nice set of off-the-shelf golf
Yep.
clubs, and my game progressed. And then at some point, I needed custom lengths because I was growing. I was a teenager, and so our tools had to evolve with our skill set. And then also, I'm kind of an amateur woodworker. And if you walk into a master woodworker's shop who's been doing it for 10,000 hours or more, they might have a single hand plane that's a $300 hand plane that serves one very special purpose that they pull out twice a year, but it is the perfect tool to deliver a very high quality product. And there's no better replacement tool. But then there's a certain amount of vanity in that tool. And you could say, well, could you get the same outcome with a cheap tool from one of the big box retailers? And you might be able to. But I just find it so funny with lately the focus on tools in the last few weeks. Not funny as in, negative, but just interesting in how tooling is becoming an amplifier for agility.
I agree, and I'm gonna have to turn this light on because this light just automatically went off because nobody walked around for 20 minutes.
Sure.
So give me 1 sec.
Sure.
There we go. That feels a lot better. I can actually. Everybody can see me now as well, and I can see.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah.
I can see
So
you.
I've set up a studio in here. So I have a camcorder linked in to do the whiteboard. So if I need to draw something on the whiteboard when I'm doing calls and stuff, I have 2 light boxes up here because light's important, especially on video. It gets difficult to see what's going on.
Yeah, no, I agree. My wife thought I was crazy about a year ago when I made sure that all the light bulbs that I bought in my home office were the same temperature, which is not where I am right now, but because I didn't want to have color correction issues
Yep.
and have all that stuff. So I had a pretty obsessive around the lighting and made sure I got all the same brand, all the same temperature, so that I had a better quality lighting setup.
Yeah, and I've been playing around with it. Like last week, I had Daniel Vacanti on to have a discussion, and we had echo problems from Daniel because I wasn't wearing headphones. So now I've got headphones. Inspect and adapt. You just got to figure it out. This is new to me as well. I've been learning how to use new tools like OBS Studio for streaming. And setting up the different things. I can even do, like, if we have a problem,
Like that.
we can go on please stand by while I go fix something or whatever. Yeah, it's been fun, and how to get Skype, which you're on, into here. That was craziness. There's lots of different.
Into OBS.
So Skype is the only video conferencing tool that I found that has a special feature called NDI. Okay, so Skype is actually, if I go to my desktop picture, which apparently I'm in the middle of it, you can see you're on Skype there. That's my 2 Skype windows, so the lack of focus one and this one, but that's not what's happening in here. Okay, so Skype is streaming all of the different video feeds that it's got locally. So that means that I'm hooking into this NDI stream and putting your display here, but I can, if 2 or 3 people were calling in, I can bring them all in and move them around, and it was very complicated to set up. I'm quite happy that I managed to get it. I think it was complicated for me, maybe. I don't know. I'm sure.
It would be complicated for me too. So
Yeah, it was. It's been a lot of work trying to figure out these things, get it good, and I think it's part of the fun. It's something else to focus on. That's the thing that I found in our, what do you call it? WoW, new world of work.
Our new way of working.
New way of working.
Yep.
Isn't it NWoW? New way of working. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
In our new way of working, all of the work and conferences that I had booked just disappeared. Not quite overnight, over the period of a week or so. So then we had to reevaluate and figure out what to do. And I think the stream for where what do you call it, funnel for where we get work in the new model is substantially different. It's it's maybe different people who would see and come to online training than would come to in-person training, although there's probably a lot of overlap as well. But there are some people who just, I don't care if it's not in person. And I think doing these recording videos, getting content out there that is in this format that people would use if they were coming to engage with you, I think is part of that new model. We're inspecting and adapting already.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've been thinking about is how does this change the training landscape? Because think about if you're a remote learner and you're in Omaha, Nebraska, here in the United States in the Midwest, and you don't have any local, quote unquote experts or very few. So you're looking at, well, where am I going to travel to? And it's like now you don't have to travel anywhere. You can go get trained in Kanban by Daniel Vacanti.
Yep.
You could go get trained in Azure DevOps from Martin Hinchelwood. I mean, so you now are a worldwide consumer, and I feel that the trainer expertise and the quality of the training becomes paramount now, because we've minimized and eliminated the barriers to immediacy and location. So to me, it's great because I think I put on a very good, high quality learning session. But I think that, for many, and I'm not saying I'm like somehow some elite trainer, because trust me, I'm not, but I like to think that there are people who are like, I want that class because that's a gym
Yep.
class, instead of, well, I'm just going to Jim's class because he happens to be in the same city or state that I'm in.
Yep.
Which that'll always be a part of it, but I want to build a reputation for my classes being of such a high quality that they're sought
Yep.
out.
And I think that's actually one of the problems that I've been having doing classes in Scotland, and that's that I am much more known outside of Scotland than inside of Scotland. I worked for 3 years from 2010 to 2013 in Seattle, doing DevOps and Agile consulting across, I don't know, I think I did 16 different states, which was quite a lot. Many of my customers were in San Diego and the surrounding area, and that's 8 hour time difference from here. And I do a lot of the training in Oslo. So in the UK, I, up until recently, have never really gotten much work, mainly because folks didn't know I was here, didn't see my content, didn't loop in that circle, I guess. But and it's interesting because one of the other PSTs in the UK had been training over in Edinburgh as well, and it's when people come to my class, many of the people that are coming to my class were flying in. Come to my class. I got very few people who were Edinburgh based. Well, maybe very few is probably one of those Scottish phrases for about half. About half of the people that were coming to my class were flying in. And I think that's just due to me going to other places around the world and doing conferences there. Like, I didn't do a lot of conferences in the UK. I did conferences in the US and Europe. My customers were US and Europe, which I can't do now. But now with virtual,
right? You sure can.
Yeah. So the PAL-E that I'm doing in a couple of weeks, I just had two folks from Germany sign up. I did a PAL-E in Germany. In fact, I did a PAL-E in Germany the weekend before they closed down all the flights. So luckily, it wasn't later than that. And I think that there were people who maybe wanted to come that couldn't, so then they booked into the Edinburgh one.
Yeah, that's good. You just said something that I have to ask about. You said folks.
Folks?
I struggle. Yes. Yeah. As a trainer, I get my hand slapped occasionally, and I do it to myself for saying,
you
because
guys.
I use guys as just a collective. It's the group. Yep. Is folks your preferred nomenclature for the class at large?
No, to be honest, guys is my preferred nomenclature. That's what I default to. That's what I mean. 3 years of training consulting around the US, guys is the go-to. And just like it is interesting. I prefer to focus on intent than on the actual words. So
Yes.
when I say guys, I'm being all inclusive, but I am being very conscious of that, and I've switched to folks. But it is very, I'm getting better at folks, and
Me
not
too.
doing guys, but I'm doing folks or everyone, or something else, just to be more conscious of it. Because I think while it doesn't matter to some people, it does matter to others. So I think it's an important thing
Right.
to take note of. But it's just like the one that always got me was people saying, "Oh shoot," or "Dagnammit," or I don't know, some curse word. Although we would say swear word in the UK, but some curse word that they've made up in order to not say a real curse word. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And from my perspective, the intent is still there. If I stub my toe and say "Dagnammit," I'm still swearing because that was my intent, even though I use words that aren't a normal swear word. So
Right.
for me, it's the same with guys and folks. If I say folks, but I mean guys, then I'm being disingenuous, and that's the bit you should get slapped down for. But if I say guys and mean folks, then I wouldn't like to get slapped down for that. But yeah, I know words matter. If you've read the Scrum Guide, you
Yeah.
will know words matter.
Words matter a
Words
lot.
matter a lot,
Yes.
and I think is definitely something I've tried to focus on.
Yeah, I have too. My grandmother famously has a replacement word for every swear word, and I'm like, why do you do that? I know what you mean. It's just like what you said. So I'm curious, because there might be somebody out there who says, "Wait, what the heck were Jim and Martin supposed to be talking about
Yes.
today?
Well,
What were we supposed to be talking
well,
about instead of just
I
riffing
had
on
two
each
things
other?"
on the list. I had
Uh-huh.
professionalism, and I had conflicting
Okay.
priorities. That were the two things that I had on the
Okay.
list. We spent about 20 minutes talking about professionalism, and then we tangented for
Yeah.
20 minutes. So
I'm unprofessional, and my two priorities are chocolate and puzzles and board games.
chocolate
So
and
that's
puzzles
three.
and board
So
games. Well, Jessica and I did a puzzle, 1,000-piece puzzle. That was kind of fun, and we collaborated on that. And we've been playing some board games. I have a group that meets on Sunday, and we've been meeting on Discord. And I played games for 9 hours on Sunday.
that's awesome.
So yeah,
Yeah, I've been aware of Discord for years, but I would tell you that for years I was probably one of 100 people in my circle that knew about
yeah,
it. And now I have people like, "Have you checked out our Discord channel? Have you checked out our
yeah, yeah,
Discord
yeah.
channel?" And it's like it overnight it went mainstream, it seems
I've
like.
I've
Yeah.
got like 20 Discord channels that I'm a member of now. It's
Yeah.
getting ridiculous. It's almost getting overwhelming.
So I do have a couple thoughts about professionalism and competing priorities. The interesting thing about priorities, and I'm curious what you think, is there is no such thing as the plural of priorities.
Yeah,
You only can have one priority. And this is now went into my teaching, especially around product ownership, is, what is your priority? Oh, well, I have 5 priorities. No, you have one. And anyone who has ever well, I have 2 priorities. I want to go to the gym and work out tonight, and I also want to go binge that new show on Netflix. Well, whichever one you do first, that's what you prioritize. You might do both
yep.
things, but whichever one you did first is actually what you prioritized.
Okay. So this is an interesting one because I bring it up in my classes quite a lot.
Okay.
And I have the same feeling as you. However, the majority of the time when I'm teaching Scrum classes, I'm teaching non-native English speakers. And in most that I've found so far, other languages, it is plural. It just means
Oh yeah.
ordered. Like priorities just
Yes.
means ordered for them. So, I sometimes I have a it's interesting for me the things that are different across those cultures and languages.
Yeah. Yeah, I think from and that's how I use it in my teaching is the difference between priority and order. And I say we might do things in a specific order that is out of priority. So in that example,
Yep.
I might go to the gym first and then go home and watch Netflix because that's the most logical order. Maybe the gym is on my way home from the
Yep.
office, and it would be dumb of me to go home, watch a television show, and then drive back to the gym. That might be dumb. It's a good thought exercise to understand the difference between priority and order, and how those things relate, especially when we're like, delivering value and building features. I mean, and again, I hate to come back to Zoom, but if did you know, and I guess this is not fact, but this is opinion, but the opinion I've heard is that Zoom's number one delighter from a feature perspective was their virtual backgrounds. That the number one thing that customers
Really?
touted as why they should, yeah, your average person, the number one reason that the feature they loved in the Zoom platform was the fun virtual backgrounds. So guess what? You see every other company prioritizing now. They're pushing out virtual backgrounds and virtual green screens. It wasn't the stability or security of the platform,
Yeah. No.
obviously. It wasn't the breakout rooms. Your average just user didn't care about breakout rooms. Now we as trainers did.
Yeah, we care about the breakout
Um,
rooms. Yeah. But
Yep. But think about it if you look at a prioritization model of like delighters and parity and which features a user cares about. Sometimes it's surprising.
I totally agree, and it's the struggle of a product owner to make a decision between bling and long-term sustainable value. And
Hmm.
sometimes you might have to prioritize the bling because we need to compete with other platforms, and if that's what users value, then we have to deliver what users value. But we also have to look at not spending all of our time just delivering things that users value. Otherwise, I I got a little story around that you've probably heard me
Do it.
tell before. But it's the Azure DevOps team at Microsoft 10 years ago were significantly behind the curve, and behind the curve is an expression that I think actually makes a lot of sense. It's one of those odd ones that actually makes a lot of sense because they were building features for users, which means users were asking them for stuff, and then they were building it in the next release. It just so happened that they had the 2 year lag time, so that really ends up being a 4 year lag time. And in the enterprise world, that was fine because enterprise didn't really give a crap. Yeah, 4 year lag time,
Hmm.
okay, whatever. That's the same as all of our software. We can't
Hmm.
adopt things that quickly. I got a customer that took nearly 4 years to move from server-based source control to distributed source control. This is a nightmare. But that um, unable to deliver quickly and building stuff for users that they were asking for it meant that you're a follower. You're following what people want to do. And one of
Yeah.
the things that they found was that they ended up building up too much technical debt because they were purely following. They didn't because technical debt doesn't matter if you're a follower. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And if you're making a lot of money off following, you can just build up technical debt and we'll just whatever's. But they spent a concerted effort. Their goal of their product unit manager, which was Brian Harry at the time, was to get ahead of the curve. How we need to build stuff for the early adopters, so that by the time the majority of people come along, we already have that feature in the product. We're the ones leading the industry, not following. And they invested a lot of time and work in that.
Yeah. Can I react to that a little bit? Because you're touching on things that are just hitting home for me. I left a company that I was at for a number of years because they refused to try and get ahead of the curve. I used to joke that their product backlog was to send me links to our competitors' websites and say, we want what they have. It just rocked me to my core. It just bothered me that is what they considered innovation was, well, this is what our competitors are succeeding with.
Yep.
So that's what we need to build. And I'm like, yeah, they had that idea a year and a half ago. It's going to take us a year to do it. And then in a year and a half, they'll be that far.
They'll be onto something else. Yeah.
And I hated when the owners of my company would go to conferences because I knew I hated it. I'd look at their calendar and I'm like, oh my God, they're going to Vegas. I can't wait to see what's going to happen in my backlog of work when they get back.
Yep.
Sure enough, come back from Vegas, I get a calendar invite that says highly important. And they'd be like, okay, this is what we just heard about. This is what everybody's doing. This is what we have to do. I'm like, I've known about that. I've been other people have been telling you for a year ago. And, so that's one reaction is I lived that nightmare for 6 years. And then Nigel Thurlow, I think, just wrote an article, one of our fellow PSTs and a very amazing thought leader about, disruptive innovators and these different companies, that sometimes can find themselves with different products or services in different quadrants.
Yep.
So some of their work is and truly innovative. Other work is achieving parity with competition. And again, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but in my training, I talk a lot about features that went from delighters to now just maintaining the status quo. Like, would anybody buy an automobile without a backup camera? No. The interesting thing about features is, as soon as you build one in and it becomes ubiquitous, meaning it's everywhere and just becomes, a part of the standard package, you can never take it away. It's very, very hard to take it away. But you have to be very careful with what you build, because every feature you build is a feature you have to maintain and extend and worry about from a stability and security standpoint. And there's a quote out there, and I forget who to attribute it to, but he said that a product is not done when you can't jam one more feature into it. A product is done when you can't take anything away from it and still have it be desired and wanted by customers.
Yep.
And I love that idea, and because that's Agile principle number 10, simplicity.
So I talk about especially in my training on both sides, both the product owner side and on the product side, lean inventory control. You want to have as few things in your backlog as possible, but it still be a backlog. And you want as few things in your product as possible and it still be a product.
Yeah, so and I'm in your school of thought on this, but now we're kind of on topic because we're talking about competing priorities. There's another coach in the same organization I'm in that feels that the product owner's backlog should be as big as possible.
Yep.
Like her dream back 4,000 items.
Oh, that's more. A small backlog.
And I'm like, no, absolutely not. How can you have focus? How can you rationalize and prioritize and order 4,000 items? And even 400, like, I don't know if there's not a perfect number. But something tells me it's not 4,000.
Do you know what I thought of right there when you said that? How do I manage 4,000 items Same way you manage 4,000 people, hierarchy. You need more hierarchy.
Right.
You need more layers. You need more
Yep.
distance between the ideas and the realities. For everybody
Yeah.
else, I'm being
Now,
sarcastic.
right. Now there's an idea of a funnel. Like, let's dump as many things into that funnel as possible. So let's consider many things. But to me,
Yeah.
the most important thing a product owner can do is take something new, look at it, rationalize it, and then say, no, we're not going to do that. But if you just say, well, we might do that someday, and I'm going to put it in the corner over there. Now you've just enhanced your anxiety around stuff.
Yep.
You have a pack rat mentality, a hoarder mentality. So I preach a more minimal, and I hate the word preach there. Sorry, I'm trying to break myself of that habit. But I suggest a more minimal approach, kind of like a Marie Kondo approach to tidying up our things so that we can focus on less, know them deeper, and hopefully that leads to more value being delivered. I just don't think you can find that needle in the haystack of 4,000 items. But if you have put the time in to get good at rationalizing things and only have a much smaller number to review, you might be able to have a grasp on your product and your market and your customers better.
Yeah, and I agree. I totally agree with that. I got a workshop from David Starr, who's a very good friend out in Seattle. I don't know if you know David.
No, I don't.
David's awesome.
I'll have to look him up.
He wrote a workshop that he provide. He had a family emergency, and I had to take over a gig of his. I think I was pretty much just the first PST he met after he found out the bad news that he had to deal with. So I took on this gig. So he provided some workshops and things around it. But the workshop was a requirements gathering workshop. Effectively, it's got some stuff around it, but effectively what you do is you take a bunch of people who are going to be working on backlog, and you take some screen from the application that they've already worked on before, and you get them to create user stories based on their hindsight of knowledge that they've got, knowing everything that's going on. Yeah. So I talk about user stories, and I talk about scenarios, so given the when thens, walk through all of that with them, show them what good ones look like, and then get them to work on breaking this down. It usually takes like an hour and a half for them to do that. But then at the end of that, they have a very intricate set of backlog and behaviors that represent the work that they know had to go into building that thing. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So then we put that to the side. Take something out of your backlog. Some item in your backlog, something usually with a UI, because it's just easier for people to understand and interact with. Put that user story on the board. Now do the same thing. And they've now realized the amount of detail that they had to go into to describe the thing they've done in the past. And I had I did it with a group where we had engineers, architects, BAs, we had business folks, we had the entire PMO office there, and we did that exercise. And halfway through the second exercise, the head of product management stopped the whole workshop, and he said that we fundamentally are not ready to go into this level to even understand what these things are. And that to me was a shocking realization for a company, to realize that they didn't have the fundamental understanding nor ability to create an ordered backlog. And that was with 20 people in the room focused on doing just that task.
Yeah. I don't know if where I stole this idea from or heard about it or if I just came up with it, but I have had teams in the past kind of do what I call retroactive refinement. So go back and refine and estimate
Yep.
something you've already done, like what you just
Yep.
described. And with the benefit of hindsight, what would we know? And they're like, oh, well, we would do this and we would estimate it like this. And we would use that exercise to create anchor stories so that we would post on the wall in our team space and say, you know what? Remember when we refined this retroactively? We all said this is what a 5 looks
Yep.
like. And this is the level of, and these are the tasks that it spawned, and this is what it spawned. And then we grab a new item off our backlog that everybody says, we don't understand this very well. And we're like, okay, but which of those things does it look like? They're like, oh, well, it's a lot like that thing. Okay. That's probably a good starting point to think about what did we need to think about to do that thing. We probably need to think about the same things to do this new thing. So I love that workshop. The other thing that when you were talking, it kind of made me think about was this idea of like a backlog snake, which was an exercise that I've done at a number of clients where I took their backlog and I printed it out,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes hundreds of items. And I arranged a conference room in such a way that all these tables form like kind of like this snake shape. And I designated, and I had this kind of fun stuffed animal at one end of the table, and it was the snake's head. And then I had the tail of the snake at the other end. And I said, okay, now take everything, and the most important thing goes at the head, and the least important thing goes at the
Mm-hmm.
tail. And they were able to order and prioritize hundreds and hundreds of items by just laying them all out on these
Yep.
tables. So the things at the end became the most important. The things at the other end became the least important. And then what the product owner was able to do is like they were able to go about midway through and be like, from this point on, all these things, just throw them away. We don't even need them. We'll never get to them. Let's just focus on these 100
Yep.
things. And we drastically trimmed the product backlog in mass as a team, as a whole group of teams. And it wasn't perfect, and there was probably some things we tossed away that came back. But that's another one of the things that I teach is if something is really important, it'll come back.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to forget about that amazing that you want to build.
Have
But
you
if it never comes back,
have you heard of a tool called email amnesty?
no, I don't think
So
I have.
it was a plugin for Outlook for people that have ridiculous numbers of unread items in their inbox. I know
Hmm.
people that have 25,000 plus unread items in their inbox. And what email
Yep.
amnesty did was it scanned through your entire inbox, and for each unread email that you had, or each person that you had an unread email from, it created an email to them, attached all of the unread emails, and said in the body, I'm declaring an email amnesty. I have too much crap in my inbox. Please send back to me things that you think are still important. And then it sends it out, and it kind of, I don't know how much of a tool it did for collecting responses, but it meant that, probably more than 50% of your emails are going to bounce. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a bunch of emails that somebody gets 10 things, and they go, well, these 2 things are still important, the rest I don't care about anymore. So suddenly you've
Yeah.
pared down that list, and I've encouraged organizations to do that with their backlog items. Declare a backlog amnesty. You've got 25,000 things in your backlog. You can't get to 25,000 things. Send them back and see what comes your way.
Yeah. Yeah. I launched an activity at a client that was kind of a mixture of that. I mean, it wasn't really amnesty, but it was this massive Kaizen event around uh, getting our backlog under control.
Yep.
And I started to dub it a mixture of the Marie Kondo method and the debt snowball method from Dave Ramsey. I don't know. Are you familiar with either of those two names, Marie Kondo or
I'm
Dave
familiar
Ramsey?
with Marie Kondo. She says you should only have 5 board games. Is that what she says?
It's probably zero. You joy, and I'm like, well, all
Yeah. Oh.
150 of these bring me joy. No, in a nutshell, really what it is we took this giant backlog and we dispatched of a whole bunch of it right away, just because it was old and the product owner could easily go through and know what was valuable and what could just be deleted. So we did that. Then with what was left, went and met with all the stakeholders and we said, what is the value of this? We're going through it, and this was kind of the organization step of the backlog.
Mm-hmm.
So the Marie Kondo method, of tidying up our backlog. And I explained, I got on my soapbox like 25 times, gave the same little mini speech to different stakeholders 25 times and said, here's why it's important for you to let go of some things. Because if you want this, you've got to let go of this because this is the crushing weight of the backlog and it's why we're not getting anything done. So we were able to get a lot of stakeholders say, you know what, you're right. We don't need that anymore. The window's passed for that, etc. Focus on these 2 or 3 things. We did that 15, 20, 25 times. Then we applied Dave Ramsey's model of the debt snowball, which is sometimes counterproductive, and you got to be careful with it, but it's doing small things first. Mm-hmm. So we were able to get a whole bunch of small things done, which then allowed us to do less context switching, more focus on the bigger things. So we might have done some less valuable work early, but it paid us back in less context switching and time and focus. And that's kind of this snowball thing of paying off your small bills so that you can then put big lumps of sum and big payments down on your really big bills. And the organization loved it, but it took a while to get it done. But man, it just led to all types of phenomenal conversations about value and priorities and competing priorities and all these things that we talk about every day.
Yeah, it's super difficult. I find that product owners really struggle to have any kind of reasonable priority or a good understanding of the product backlog, or even to be able to be empowered to do that. And I think that's an organizational issue. It comes from the hierarchical Tayloristic practices that we're used to, and backing off from those ideas is really difficult. Have you seen I did a session a little while ago. I guess, what did I call it? The tyranny of Taylorism and how to spot Agile BS. Did you see that one?
I did, and I've seen your content from it. I
love
it.
Yeah. So that piece at the start where I talk about where Taylorism came from is something that I do in almost all of my classes. Maybe not a PSF, but a PAL-E and a PSM. I always cover that because I think that too many folks dismiss this waterfall thing that they've heard of. Yeah, they talk about it as waterfall, which is where those big backlogs that are difficult to prioritize come from, because we have to have a list of everything before we start. We have to spend 6 months in analysis before we do anything. That's maybe an exaggeration, but depends on the organization that you're working with. And bringing that down to, I just need 2 weeks work for the team. I need to keep a team busy for a couple of weeks, and then that will give me a couple of weeks to come up with more stuff to keep that team busy. And getting that balance is really important. I'm glad you enjoyed that session that I did.
I did. I really liked it. I love this thought of, or not the thought, but the understanding the history of Taylorism and how it influences modern day thinking and the relationship with Gantt and other contemporaries about, how work used to get done and this
Yeah.
idea of there being one best way to do
Yeah.
something.
Well, that's something. Best
Uh,
practice is something we fight against every day.
yeah.
No such thing as best practice, only
Yep.
adequate practices for the situation at hand.
That's right. Only a generally useful practice that works in some
Yeah,
contexts.
exactly. Exactly. So
Yeah.
we have been rambling for an hour and 20 minutes. So I think it's probably a good idea to wrap it up.
Sure.
So if you could just, do you have anything you're working on next? Do you have any public classes? Anything you want to tell folks about?
So yeah, I do have some public classes will be out on the scrum.org site. Their home cities are Columbus and St. Louis.
Yep.
Right now, please go take a look at those. Um, I am about to launch a website called
Ooh, cool.
noboringretros.com. And even though No Boring Retros is the title, because that's something I'm very, very passionate about. It's just going to kind of serve as a portal for all of my content. So
Yeah.
my podcast appearances, things like this, just my random thoughts. But there will be kind of a big section of the site dedicated to retrospectives and all that, because I am a big believer in the power of retrospectives. So yeah, look for that. And then I also love for people to connect with me on LinkedIn. I mean, that's kind of how I stay in touch with my colleagues and my students.
Yeah.
Right or wrong, I'm not a great social media maven, so LinkedIn is still kind of the preferred way to get in touch with me.
Well, I managed to get LinkedIn streaming enabled on my account, so this was going out live on LinkedIn. So you'll be able to go tag that. I don't know how you do that. I don't think you can
I'll
find
figure it
stuff.
out.
Yeah, the LinkedIn streaming is super new, so it's a little bit difficult to find stuff after the fact. The other platforms are a little bit easier because they're more mature. But that's awesome.
Yeah.
We'll definitely look forward to that. And I think in that vein, if anybody has any feedback, review of how we organized this, how we set it up, maybe just the audio, or it could be how much of a plan we had for this sprint, which was not very much. We had a very loose plan. How much we got off topic. Maybe you liked that, maybe you didn't. It would be really useful to get feedback on that, and hopefully Jim and I will have maybe a retro, and maybe we do this again at some point.
Love to.
Cool. Well,
Love our chats.
thanks for coming on, Jim.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool. Well, hopefully see you next time.
All right.